Yes.
Quite rightly, because he paid £65 for this coffer, and the auctioneer thinks it could make 150.
Oh, we hope so.
So fingers crossed.
Great thing, great colour. Internet straight in at £100.
Yes! Well done.
120. We haven't sold it yet. 140. I'm in the room at 120. You need to be 140, sir. 160. 150, 160, 170, 160 with you at the moment, sir. In the front, at 160, I'll sell a wheel. Done. Sir.
How good is that?
What a start.
Champagne.
Jubilation, jubilation. £160 was the hammer price, a profit of £95. How good is that?
That's very good.
So when we add that to your running total of 18, a profit of £113.
Yes,
Amazing. But do you know what? On Bargain Hunt, it could or it could not be a winning score. So say nothing to the Reds, and let's see how it all pans out.
Lovely, yes.
Well. How do you do it? I'll never know. Somehow we have ended up with a very close result.
Oh!
Between you, £3.
No!
£3. Each team had one item that made a seriously big profit.
Oh!
But who profited the most? Today's runners-up, the Blues!
Oh, come on!
By £3. £113. And
We told you we had to.
Blues. It was really Richard who came in for you because
absolutely.
that coffer,
I know.
£95
Big
profit
time.
on the bonus buy.
Well done,
it was
Richard. Thank you.
great, which means that I can hand to you £113. It's such a good result.
Well done, thank
you, Reds. I agree.
Oh,
Well,
even
that's
Stevens.
a shame.
Oh, even Stevens.
Wiped his face.
It's a shame it didn't make a profit, but it also didn't do any damage because no profit, no loss, but overall a profit of £18.
So we've got £18 in the pot.
You've got to be chuffed with that.
Yes, we are. That's not bad. That's,
Profit on Bargain Hunt
Yeah.
is
2 bottles of
often...
wine.
Right, ladies, we have got a question for you. Do you want to go ahead with the bonus buy? It's the 17th century style coffer for which Richard paid £65.
We liked it.
Yes.
We're going to go with it.
Right, ladies, you're
Okay.
putting your faith in Richard
We
Medley.
are, yes.
Quite rightly, because he paid £65 for this coffer, and the auctioneer thinks it could make 150.
Oh, we hope so.
So fingers crossed.
Great thing, great colour. Internet straight in at £100.
Yes! Well done.
120. We haven't sold it yet. 140. I'm in the room at 120. You need to be 140, sir. 160. 150, 160, 170, 160 with you at the moment, sir. In the front, at 160, I'll sell a wheel. Done. Sir.
How good is that?
What a start.
Champagne.
Jubilation, jubilation. £160 was the hammer price, a profit of £95. How good is that?
That's very good.
So when we add that to your running total of 18, a profit of £113.
Yes,
Amazing. But do you know what? On Bargain Hunt, it could or it could not be a winning score. So say nothing to the Reds, and let's see how it all pans out.
lovely, yes.
Well. How do you do it? I'll never know. Somehow we have ended up with a very close result.
Oh!
Between you, £3.
No!
£3. Each team had one item that made a seriously big profit.
Oh!
But who profited the most? Today's runners-up, the Blues!
Oh, come on!
By £3. £113. And
We told you we had to.
Blues. It was really Richard who came in for you
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
that coffer,
I know.
£95
Big
profit
time.
on the bonus buy.
Well done,
it was
Richard. Thank you.
great, which means that I can hand to you £113. It's such a good result.
Well done, thank
you, Reds. I agree.
Thank you.
I will leave you to enjoy your profit.
Thank you.
As I turn to the Reds. Unbelievable. Pipping you at the post by £3 with £116.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We've all had a great time today on Bargain Hunt, and you can apply to be on the show via our website. Details on the screen now. You can join us on Twitter, and of course, you can always join us again for some more bargain hunting. Yes?
Yes!
More treasure hunting to come this afternoon. The quest to find the Holy Grail with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade on BBC One at 1:45 after the news, which is next.
Excuse me, are you playing Scrooge? No, Chris is playing Scrooge.
Are you the spirit?
A Christmas Carol goes wrong, Saturday the 30th of December on BBC One.
It was more than just a dance movie. It became one of the most significant cultural events of the 20th century. 40 years later, it's lost none of its power.
What better way to survive a family Christmas than with a serious bit of culture? Starting with Saturday Night Fever, the ultimate disco movie. Tonight at 9 on BBC Two.
Who is it? It's been 300 years! Why am I still having to tell you who I am? Well, come in then! We're actually four-fours.
With some best bits and some new bits.
Let's break the internet.
300 years of French and Saunders, Christmas Day at 10:35 on BBC One.
Now on BBC One, Jane Hill with the BBC News at 1.
Britain and Russia say relations between their two countries are at their worst for many years. Boris Johnson, meeting his counterpart in Moscow, says both sides want the situation to improve.
There is no point in simply sitting on the sidelines and complaining about each other. We have to engage.
We'll ask what the Foreign Secretary's visit can achieve. Also this lunchtime. Theresa May denies knowing about allegations made by Kate Maltby about Damian Green before he was promoted to First Secretary of State. Separatist parties celebrate winning a slim majority in the snap Catalonia election, a setback for Spain's government in Madrid. 30 years of burgundy passports are coming to an end. The government confirms British passports will revert to blue when we leave the EU. And millions of people are expected to be on the move today as the Christmas getaway begins.
Later on BBC London, at breaking point, staff at a prison in Hertfordshire claim staff shortages mean inmates are locked up for hours. And what are the Christmas wishes for London businesses pondering the impact of Brexit?
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has acknowledged there are serious difficulties in the relationship between Russia and the UK. He's on the first visit to Moscow by a British Foreign Secretary for more than 5 years. In a tense press conference, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov rejected suggestions that Russia had behaved aggressively towards the UK, but agreed that relations are at, as he put it, a very low level. Our Moscow correspondent Sarah Rainsford reports.
The first handshake looked warm enough, but Boris Johnson came here promising to talk tough, to warn Russia to stop what he called its destabilising actions. It was Russia's foreign minister, though, who set the tone. Sergei Lavrov said relations with Britain were at a very low level and chided the Foreign Secretary for such public criticism. Things aren't easy, Boris Johnson agreed, before baffling the Russians with talk of crisps.
There are increasing exports of British kettle crisps to Russia.
But both men agreed one thing, that after 5 years without a visit by a UK foreign minister, it was time to talk face to face again. Relations broke down over the conflict in Ukraine, still unresolved, still deadly after almost 4 years. Theresa May recently accused Russia of fomenting the crisis here. Today, Boris Johnson again called the annexation of Crimea from Ukraine illegal. Then there's Syria and Russia's controversial military support for President Assad. This month, Vladimir Putin declared mission accomplished in Syria, but the threat of terrorism there, the need to build the peace now, is one that concerns Britain and Russia equally. So it was that sense of common interest that the Foreign Secretary underlined after talks that lasted well over the hour.
There is no point in simply sitting on the sidelines and complaining about each other. We have to engage. We have to talk to each other.
There were some light moments. Sergei Lavrov said he trusted Boris Johnson so much he'd use his Russian name, Boris.
Boris, da.
But there were frosty touches too.
I cannot recall any action by Russia that was aggressive in relation to the UK. But we have heard accusations, even insultingly formulated, that we support a criminal regime in Syria, that we are aggressors, that we are occupiers, we annex other territories.
Those are all claims Russia denies, even now. Relations with Moscow have been bad, verging on hostile. Boris Johnson came here to address the reasons for that directly. There were no breakthroughs, none were expected. But the first steps towards thawing the chill have now been taken. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Moscow.
Well, let's talk to our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, who has joined me. Given some of that testiness that we saw there, James, what can be achieved by a trip like this?
Very simply, dialogue. When you have relations at such a frozen level, you need to do something to improve that, because for all the differences, and they are genuine differences between the UK and Russia, there are also some areas of commonality where the UK has a national interest to try and cooperate with the Russians. That could be over the Iran nuclear deal. That's now been threatened by the United States. If that went pear-shaped, the UK would need to be able to talk to the Russians to see if they could, what could be resolved there. Also on the future of Syria. When there is some kind of political settlement in the future, the UK wants to be able to talk to the Russians about that. The Russians want to talk to us about some of the funding for things like that. There's the whole issue of North Korea. The UK has to be able to talk to Russia to try and put pressure on the regime there in Pyongyang, also on the Chinese to put pressure on themselves. These are all areas where the UK needs to have a channel of communication with the Russians, despite all of those differences. And that's why you have to have these kind of meetings. And I think the fact that it's happened might have led to a recitation of all those differences that we've just seen in Sarah's report. But at the same time, officials now, they have another little relationship. It means that Boris Johnson and Sergei Lavrov can talk to each other a little bit more easily on those areas where we have a national interest. Let's also not forget all those British football fans going to Russia next year for the World Cup. We need to be able to talk about visas and stuff like that.
All right, James, thanks very much. James Landale. Theresa May has denied she knew about claims that the former First Secretary of State, Damien Green, made inappropriate advances towards the Conservative activist Kate Maltby when she promoted him to serve as her deputy. Yesterday, Ms Maltby told the BBC that she'd raised concerns about him with a Downing Street official last year. Speaking this morning on a visit to Cyprus, the Prime Minister said she only knew about the allegations when they were published in a newspaper last month.
No, I first learnt of these allegations when Kate Maltby wrote about them in The Times. I recognise that Kate Maltby was obviously extremely distressed by what had happened. Damien Green has recognised that. He said that in the letter that he wrote to me, and he has apologised. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do.
Oh, Theresa May speaking in Cyprus. Let's get the latest from our political correspondent, Layla Nathu. Where does this go from here, Layla, given what the Prime Minister was saying there?
Well, Jane, the official investigation into Damian Green, triggered by Kate Maltby's claim that he sent her a suggestive text, that he fleetingly touched her knee, that investigation is now over. It found that Kate Maltby's account was plausible, and although that wasn't the reason that Damian Green eventually had to resign, it did find that the encounters between Kate Maltby and Damian Green were inconclusive, but that her account was plausible. And Damian Green is now gone. He still disputes her version of events and has apologised for making her feel uncomfortable. But Theresa May will hope that this is really a line drawn under the whole matter. She has, after all, sacked her closest political ally. She's denied knowing anything about the claims made against him before she promoted him to be the effective Deputy Prime Minister. But the idea that Kate Maltby may have told a senior Downing Street official about her concerns speaks to the idea that perhaps in the past there was not a culture in Westminster of taking allegations of inappropriate behaviour seriously enough. Now, the Prime Minister, since we've had this wave of people coming forward and allegations, has talked about renewing a renewed push to tackle harassment in Westminster to make people feel safe at work. The political parties themselves have brought in new complaints procedures, but it remains to be seen whether there will be a significant cultural shift in terms of the way people are treated, in terms of the willingness for people to come forward with complaints and to take action when complaints are made.
Leila, thank you. Leila Nathu at Westminster. The Spanish government has been meeting to discuss the results of regional elections in Catalonia, which saw separatist parties win a slim majority in the new assembly. The result is a setback for the government in Madrid, which called the election after an independence referendum held earlier this year was ruled unlawful. Our Europe correspondent Gavin Lee is outside the Catalan Regional Assembly in Barcelona. Gavin.
Well, after these extraordinary weeks, this was the moment today that the Spanish government had hoped they would settle the independence crisis. It hasn't turned out that way. After a record number of votes, 4.5 million people here voting in this region the size of Belgium, it seems it's a very splintered, fractured result. There was one singular party that was the all-out winner, a unity party. The separatist parties are claiming victory. I've been following the result here for the past 24 hours. Smiling, and on the face of it, triumphant, Inés Arrimadas, the pro-Spain leader of the Citizens Party, has taken the most seats in the Catalan Parliament, but not enough for a majority. Is this your victory?
It's a victory. We have won the elections for the first time in Catalonia.
And you can form a coalition?
It is difficult, but we will try.
This may be a fleeting moment in the limelight for Inés Arrimadas because the power balance now belongs to the party in second place, the self-exiled ex-president Carles Puigdemont, who's watching and waiting in Belgium, having fled following his attempt to break the region away. Collectively, the three separatist parties that declared independence and triggered these elections are the only parties likely to be able to form a coalition for a majority. But the ex-president is setting conditions first.
I am ready to meet in Brussels with Rajoy. I'm ready to do so because there has to be new policies in Spain and Europe for political solutions, not repression.
While the politicians work out their next moves, Catalans will continue to feel the impact. Thousands of companies have temporarily left the region, blaming instability. The constant adversity and global headlines has led to a 10% drop in tourism too.
From the outside it seems like a revolution and a lot of dramas, but and we are losing business a little bit in the last months because of that. Spain and Catalonia, and they find a way to work here, you know. Everybody in the end has something to lose.
Spain's Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy held an extraordinary cabinet meeting this morning. His government gambled by calling these elections and temporarily placing the region under its direct rule. But that gamble appears to have failed. Catalonia is still under emergency measures, and it will now be down to weeks of coalition talks to see how the independence crisis plays out. Gavin Lee, BBC News, Barcelona. Now, in the past few minutes, there has been a development. Mariano Rajoy, the Spanish Prime Minister, is saying he acknowledges unity parties have lost, that it's in the hands of the separatist parties to go forward, and that he will speak in a dialogue with Carles Puigdemont. So we are potentially entering a new phase of talks ahead of this attempt to build a coalition government.
Thank you, Gavin Lee. A 44-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of murder after a woman was stabbed to death while at work in a supermarket in Skipton in North Yorkshire. The victim, who's been named locally as 30-year-old Jodie Wilshire, was attacked in the Aldi store in front of shoppers yesterday afternoon. For nearly 30 years, Britons have been carrying these burgundy passports, the common colour of the EU. But it's been confirmed this will change when Britain leaves. The Home Office has announced that the covers will revert to blue from 2019. The new design won't carry the EU insignia, and for some Brexit campaigners, the colour blue has become a symbol of independence. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
The Great British Passport, shortly not to be available in European burgundy, because it turns out Brexit means blue, and the E word nowhere to be seen. Some never liked, well, the pink one, as this BBC Newsnight report in 1995 made perfectly clear.
And for some people, pocket-sized burgundy simply isn't British.
The passport is something that so many people still have fond memories of. Their British passport, that blue companion on your travels with the family for many, many years. And it's really pleased to be able to let people know that we're going back to that classic blue and gold design.
Well, not quite. The last British passport was much bigger, hard-backed and a very dark blue. The European one, which replaced it way back now in 1988, was floppy, smaller and easier to put in a pocket. The new one, and this is just a mock-up, is of roughly the same design, but it will keep all of the security features that are currently built into passports to make them hard to copy, and it will add some.
First passport.
Your first ever passport?
First ever passport.
Wow, that's interesting. It seems going blue is largely about showing we're going it alone. Reaction?
It's blue, isn't it? It's back to England.
I think it's a crying shame. We have this fantastic ability to travel around the rest of the world, and we are looked upon favourably with our immigration policy and everything else. And I think now it's just a bit embarrassing, really, to be honest.
I think the decision was a huge aspect of, the country moving forward, and I think in order to move forward there needs to be changes, and if that's going to be distinguished by a simple colour, then why not?
Well, what's the difference?
It's a different colour. That's it.
I just preferred it when we were in Europe, everything.
Really?
Just everything, yeah.
I don't think it was needed, but we wanted to give a message that we're standing out, we are different. I think to that extent it serves a purpose.
I want my passport back.
And he says things are looking up.
I think it's the first bit of good news Brexiteers have had for a long time. The last few months have been very frustrating.
The new passports will be issued from late 2019 when old ones are renewed or people simply apply for one. The new colour may split the country as much as Brexit itself. Perhaps this, the winner of an unofficial passport design competition, might have been an even better choice. Tom Simons, BBC News at the Passport Office.
The time is 16 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. Britain and Russia say relations between the two countries are at their worst for many years. Coming up, an ode to joy, why 10,000 singers in Japan gather to perform Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Later on BBC London, the kindness of commuters, how Londoners are helping a homeless charity this Christmas, providing the basics for the capital's rough sleepers. And it's shaping up to be a very mild run-up to Christmas Day. We'll have a full forecast in 15 minutes.
Drivers, rail passengers and coach travellers are being warned to expect delays as millions of people begin the Christmas getaway. Highways England has suspended 400 miles of roadworks, but say busy road conditions should nonetheless be expected. Virgin Trains says strikes which were due to affect the West Coast Main Line have been called off, but the company expects there will still be some cancellations. Our transport correspondent, Richard Westcott, has the latest.
It's not the white Christmas the kids were hoping for,
The Midlands motorway shrouded in fog today. But despite the warnings, the Christmas getaway seems to be running smoothly. So Dean, busy day for you guys?
Yes, busy.
Of course, not everyone gets Christmas off. The motorways still need patrolling. Well, they had called this Frantic Friday because they thought that the commuter traffic would be mixing with all the holiday traffic, creating millions more journeys. Touch wood, though, despite the fog, the roads haven't been too bad so far. At the nearby services, some were taking a little break from the driving.
It's been quite quiet, hasn't it? I wouldn't say it's been
all,
busy
really.
at all. No, we've come from Chippenham and it's been straight through. Even the junction M4 to M5 was fine.
It's been quite busy, just zipping about the roads and stuff. The motorway's not been too bad, but the side roads, about the snow and stuff, so it's been quite slippery.
Highways England are temporarily lifting 400 miles of roadworks to help ease any jams. Airports will also have their busiest day of the season, with the biggest, Heathrow, handling 130,000 passengers. Another Christmas holiday tradition is engineering works on the railways, with a £160 million upgrade programme starting tomorrow. If you're travelling, check online. Some services will be cut, some London stations will be shut or partly shut, including London Bridge, where they're putting the finishing touches to a £1 billion rebuild. If you've used London Bridge Station over the last few years, you know how stressful it's been as they've tried to redevelop it whilst keeping it open as best they can. There's going to be lots of work going on here over Christmas so that these 5 platforms can open on January the 2nd. It's more frustration for holiday travellers, so why do it at Christmas?
We do it at this time of year because the railway is closed anyway on Christmas Day and Boxing Day, but also at this time of year about 50% fewer people travel by train. So in terms of the overall level of impact on passengers, this is the best time of year to do it.
Back on the roads, it could be busy later today, tomorrow, and when the shops are back open after Christmas. Bit worrying for adults.
Well, yeah, it was kind of hyped up, but I mean, we're going to have to make the journey either way. We're kind of prepared for it, but it's been a lot better than we thought it would be.
But some have got other things on their mind.
Happy Christmas!
Richard Westcott, BBC News on the M5.
Well, in a moment we'll get the very latest from Richard. He's now at Highways England's National Traffic Operations Centre, which is in Quinton in the West Midlands. First, though, let's talk to Ian Palmer, who, as you see, is outside Euston Station in London. How's it been? How's it looking, Ian?
Jane, a lot better now that Virgin Trains cancelled that planned industrial action that they announced earlier. The main headline news, as you've been hearing in Richard's report, is that London Bridge Station is going to be completing its 3rd phase of its upgrade, and that means that there'll be no services into London Bridge or London Charing Cross stations from tomorrow until January the 1st, end of play January the 1st. And that's going to really disrupt all mainline routes right across Britain. The West Coast Main Line is urging passengers to complete their journeys by the end of play on Saturday because London Paddington Station will be closed between the 27th of December and Christmas Eve. And indeed, if you're travelling on the West Coast Main Line, there's going to be no service between Preston and Lancaster. If you have to travel between London and Glasgow, you're being urged to travel via Edinburgh, and that will add an hour to your journey. As far as the airports are concerned, there are going to be 4.3 million people trying to fly to different climes over the festive period. Heathrow Airport is expected to deal with 130 passengers today alone. Gatwick Airport will deal with 67,000 passengers. There are no specific problems if you are travelling by air today, but the advice is that if you are going to fly, then arrive at least an hour before you normally would. Jane.
Ian, thank you. Let's talk to Richard Westcott as well. How's it looking on the roads?
Well, that big ball behind me, I think, sums it up. So this is the nerve centre of Highways England. You can see all the roads from all the cameras all across England. We've got the M1 up there, we've got the M60, the M25. As you can see, pretty free-flowing at the moment. I suspect what most people do is they see things in the papers, they see things on the TV and the radio, it's going to be really bad. A lot of people, I suspect, either stay away or they stagger their journey across the weekend, because obviously we've got Saturday and Sunday to get where you want to go as well. So we will see what happens later on tonight when the commuters start hitting the road as well. But as it stands at the moment, touch wood, it's been okay.
Touch wood indeed. Thank you very much, Richard Westcott and Ian Palmer. Now, people should pay a deposit on plastic bottles to try to protect the seas from the devastating effects of plastic pollution. That's the call from a group of MPs. The Commons Environmental Audit Committee